So let's talk about the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets are a franchise which recently have gotten in a lot of, in a lot of heat because of the recent contract which they just gave out. But let's talk about that. The Charlotte Hornets are a franchise which has been rebuilding for years now. They just sold the team to a new owner, and Michael Jordan was the owner of the franchise, or at least the majority owner. And he was terrible at running. He was one of these owners who doesn't really understand how to run a team. When it came to putting it together, he would always have some lackluster people. He would never hire the right like GMs, and the coaches were bad, and there was never really a culture in Charlotte apart from the ones that the players said. This caused them to really lack any type of identity or any type of uh, difference from teams like the Rockets or teams like the Pistons, which are just young teams which are confused, even though the Hornets have a much better superstar than those two teams. This kept going for a while until recently, last year, where they got the second overall pick in Brandon Miller. And this pick was supposed to be a turning point for the franchise, right? Not Brandon Miller, but really the pick of getting the second overall pick. You could trade it for a young guy. You could get Scoot Henderson. You could do a bunch of things with this pick. And for a franchise who's rebuilding, it's really good to get a second overall pick. The problem with the Hornets is that the Hornets are not ran well. And they let Michael Jordan still take the pick even though he had already sold the team, or if he was in talks of selling it. He picked Brandon Miller. In my opinion, in terms of fit, it's the best fit. But in terms of talent, he's not the best talent there. If we're being honest, in this NBA, the first thing that you really get together on a team is your guards. Because even though big men are as important as guards, your guards are the ones who are handling the ball 90% of the time. So if you have players who you can't trust handling the ball, it makes it very hard for any team to win. Like if you look at the past three champions, right, their point guards have been elite, right? You have Jamal Murray. Even you could look at the past four. You have Jamal Murray, right, which was the point guard for the Nuggets this season. You have Stephen Curry, which was the point guard for the Warriors in 2022. You have Drew Holiday, which was the point guard for the Bucks in 2021, and then you have LeBron, which ran point guard for the Lakers in that 2020 season when they won the championship. If you look at all of those players which I just named, they're all-star, all-NBA, playoff performers, good defenders, great ball handlers, playmakers. They all have something, and they're all-star caliber, right? And in my opinion, that just speaks to the importance of a point guard. In the modern NBA, right before in the league, you could have a point guard specialist and win a championship, right? Like you had teams like the Bulls, which had, when Michael Jordan was there, which had guys like Ron Harper, where she was just there to be able to play defense and a point of attack defender and be able to dribble a little bit. And he didn't need to be a superstar. But in the modern NBA, the guard position is so important that every single champion needs to have an elite or at least a high level guard to just win. And that's the first requirement. That's why, like, we could trade back what I'm saying back to like the 2015 season, because Steph Curry was the one who made that position so important in the modern NBA, right? Like, if you look at 2014, they had Tony Parker. But if you look at those Heat teams, the ones with LeBron and D Wade, their point guard was like Mario Chalmers. They didn't have an elite point guard, but in 2015 forward, it started a trend of needing to have an elite point guard to win, right? Like you had Steph Curry in 2015, Kyrie Irving in 2016. You had then Steph Curry again, then you had Kyle Lowry, and then you had the four which I just named. And in my opinion, this set a trend which will probably continue for the entirety of the 2020s, where the guard position has become the most important position. And I mean, the Hornets did a pretty good pick. they got Lamelo Ball. I'm pretty sure they got him third overall, if I'm not mistaken, in the 2020 draft behind Anthony Edwards and James Wiseman. And this caused them to be in a good position because they finally had their franchise player, right? A guy who could play make, a guy who could be, bringing people into the stands, a guy who could get you, 20 and 10 very easily if he actually had a full season to develop, and a guy who actually wants to play on your team. Like LaMelo doesn't seem like he wants to leave Charlotte, and that's a very surprising thing coming from a young superstar wanting to be in this small market franchise, right? And this has been all good. We've seen it. We've seen LaMelo suffer through some injuries, so they've been bad for some seasons now because apart from LaMelo not being able to get them to a lot of wins because he's one player on a horrible franchise, the problem is that the Hornets are not very good at getting players. Like their big man rotation is garbage. Their best big man in the last 3-4 years has been Mason Plumlee, and their wings, like they just have like washed up Gordon Hayward. And the one season where they actually got a good player in Miles Bridges, the next season he beat his girlfriend and had a bunch of domestic abuse charges, and now he's serving time, right? And he's gonna get convicted for jail time. So really, the Hornets have been a mess, right? And now with this draft, they had a chance to redeem themselves. They had a chance to get a player who could serve them well, who could be a serviceable player, who could play big minutes, who could actually play, and who could develop next to LaMelo, right, as a player as the players in the future. Now, you could either pick Brandon Miller, a shooting wing, which complements LaMelo very well as he plays defense and can space the floor, but also a guy whose ceiling is not that high. Like Brandon Miller's ceiling is like Brandon Ingram, right? Then you have a guy like Scoot Henderson, which is a point guard, can make his own shot, right? Is tough, plays defense. He actually plays defense, runs like a gazelle, is strong, and his upside is like Russell Westbrook, right? Like just an extreme floor general, and a guy who could do it all, and he has a way higher potential. And I'm talking about MVP Russell Westbrook, by the way, than a guy like Brandon Miller, right? And so you look at both of those guys, you look at their potential, and most people in that situation would be like, well, there's two ways to think about the pick. Do you take Brandon Miller for fit, or do you take Scoot Henderson for just talent? And we've seen this throughout the years, right? We've seen look at the Warriors. They could have picked LaMelo Ball. They could have had LaMelo. And James Wiseman, they picked him because of fit, right? And we look at last year's draft, right? Where it's like last year's draft, when it comes to fit, really, the Magic should have probably picked Jabari Smith because they have playmaking point guards and they already had like 4 different big men and power forwards and stuff who could play. So they should have probably picked Jabari, but they picked Paulo because they picked the talent. And it's shown throughout history that talent historically gets you better results. But now that they have this pick in, well, we have to look at Charlotte. Is that when we look at the Charlotte Hornets, what do they really want now? It's obvious that they need to let Brandon Miller develop. They need to let their guys get some run in and figure each other out. And they need to have another healthy season from LaMelo as his ankles have been just completely destroying him. And this team could be very good, but they could also be very bad. LaMelo just signed there for a ridiculously big contract, and I want to say that shout out to him for signing that and for staying in Charlotte. I know Charlotte is not the best franchise of all time, but also when we speak about this franchise, it's what are they going to do for the future? Are they going to keep building through the draft? Are they going to try to lure another star in? Are they going to try to develop pieces? Like, what is the future for the Charlotte Hornets that would have me excited being a Charlotte fan? I like the team and I like the players that they have. I'm just confused about what's next. So, yeah, that's been what I think. And coming into next season, I want to see what Charlotte does.